As I'm sure you realize, these videos are unscripted. That's why there's so many mistakes in them. And I just kind of talk and just do my thing. But that doesn't mean that sometimes I don't cover a topic and then do it a second time. And so I have attempted to do this video multiple times now because I want to share this, but it's a delicate message. I don't want it to come off the wrong way, and I want it to be helpful when I try to share this with people. So, calorie counting could lead to a disordered pattern of eating. And the reason why that is very important. I want to explain this to people in a way that will be helpful to you. This is not to be critical of calorie counting, critical of counting macros. This is not to be critical of people. You're not a moral failure. It's just the way your brain is wired. And so what I'd like to explain here is some of the psychology of behaviors and addiction, for instance. So to start this off, I want to talk about alcoholism, because this is a very good example. So you have someone who's an alcoholic, and they manage to stop drinking, and now they're abstinent. If they give in and have one drink, though, what often happens is they go completely off the rails, and they have a second drink, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, and a sixth, and it just keeps going, and they go on a bender. We know this happens, so we call it falling off the wagon, right? The reason for that is because they have now created a psychological boundary or barrier, no drinking. And when they break that barrier, it's kind of like, I hate to use the sex analogy, but like, maybe you held out for a long time. I'm going to stay a virgin till marriage, and then finally you went and did it. And then you're like, now we have sex every day. Okay? With your first boyfriend or first girlfriend, whatever, right? It becomes less of a big deal after the first time. I hope that's a close enough analogy that people can relate to it if you haven't had problems with substance abuse or something, or known someone that dealt with substance abuse. But essentially what I'm saying here is that if you have a rule in place, I will not drink alcohol, and then you break that rule and have one drink, you're not drunk from one drink. But now you broke that boundary, so you'll have a second, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, right? Similarly, we look at shopping behavior, compulsive shopping, right? The quote, shopaholic, right? So you struggle with this, you overspend, you overbuy, you do compulsive shopping. You have X amount of money, and you go and spend more than you have, and then next thing you know, you go on what's similar to like a bender, right? You fall off the wagon, and then you spend even more. Again, you had a boundary. You had a barrier. You said X number of dollars. You broke that boundary barrier, and so then it's like, I'm going to go all in now. Right. So why does that happen? Well, the first thing that we need to pay attention to is the fact that you had a rule in place. You had a barrier. You had a boundary. When you break that rule, when you break that boundary, right, we have internal thoughts. I'm a failure. I blew it. You feel guilt. You feel shame. Okay? You're quitting smoking. And one day you crack and you buy a pack of cigarettes. And you smoke that first cigarette. It feels good. You're like, fuck it. I'm a failure. I can't do this. I can't quit. So then you smoke the whole pack and you buy another one. That's what happens. Now, logically, I can give you this weird thing that I call stomping on your iPhone. That's my analogy that I give to people. So you slip up, you dropped your iPhone. Your iPhone didn't break when it hit the ground, so now you stomp on your iPhone. If you had that one cigarette and you said, oh no, I'm good, I'm not going to have another one, and threw the pack out, you'd be fine. If you were trying to quit drinking and you had one drink and you said, know what, nope, I'm not going to do this. I dropped my iPhone. I'm not going to stomp on my iPhone. I'm going to stop at one. I'm going to get back on track. You'd be fine. The same thing happens with diets. We see it all the time. People are sticking to a really strict diet. They finally give in and they have one Oreo, and then they go, oh, I'm a failure. I'm off my diet. I'm going to eat the whole thing. And so then they eat all of the Oreos. Now, one Oreo did not ruin your diet. One Oreo didn't suddenly make you fat. If you're trying to lose weight and you had one Oreo and just were like, that was off my diet, but I'm right back on, that one Oreo is going to have zero impact. There's not enough calories in one Oreo to throw off your weight loss for a whole week if you were perfect on all your other meals. Hell, you could have one Oreo every day, and I really doubt that it would harm you in terms of your weight loss if all of your other meals were on point. One Oreo is not that calorically devastating. But when you eat the whole thing, and you eat all of the Oreos, and you do it day after day, now you're going to get yourself into trouble. Now you're offsetting any weight loss that you had. This is kind of like I stick to my diet Monday through Friday, and then I go all off, everything, and eat ice cream and pizza and donuts and stuff like that on Saturday and Sunday, and then I start my diet again on Monday. Whatever progress you made Monday through Friday, you undid it on Saturday and Sunday, right? We've seen this. We've seen this happen, okay? There are some people who are great at sticking to these things. If that's you, then this video is not about you. So I'm sorry for wasting your time, but stick around if you would like to understand some psychology, because maybe it will help you with some other asset in your life. There could be other things in your life that you care about, okay? And for those of you who have had this experience where you went off the rails and ate something you shouldn't have, so then you went and ate the whole box of Oreos, this video is for you, because I'm going to explain to you a little bit of psychology here about barriers and boundaries. We're going to continue with another analogy. We're going to look at people's behaviors whenever people cheat, infidelity. So you're married and you're faithful, and you're married and you're faithful for a very long time, and then finally enough pressure and enough situations come together, and this person decides that they're going to cheat on their spouse. And so they cheat on their spouse. Now, here's the thing that's weird about that, is that people won't do it just once, because now they've broken that barrier. So then they go and have a full-blown affair, right? I've already cheated on my spouse. I've already broken that barrier. I've already broken that boundary. So I'm going to go have an affair. And the whole thing of once a cheater, always a cheater, I don't really necessarily believe that, but I do believe it to be true in a given relationship. So maybe in their next relationship they'll be faithful, but in their current relationship, they've already broken that trust. They've already broken that that bond, that boundary, that rule in that relationship. And so in the future, they will probably continue to cheat on that partner, just simply due to the fact that they've already broken that barrier. That doesn't mean that some people aren't amazing and pull it together and make amends and fix their marriages, but as a general rule, if you look at even research on this kind of stuff, they do research on marriages and infidelity. Typically, if someone cheats, they're going to cheat more because they've already broken that barrier. And once you break that barrier, it's kind of well, that was the hard part, right? It's like that weird thing of motivation. The hard part's just getting started. Well, the same thing is true even of a behavior you're trying to avoid. So you have this great willpower and you avoid it, and then you break that barrier, and then there goes all the willpower. You just go, fuck it. I'm going to eat all the Ben & Jerry's. All right? So this is where I'm going to come back around to calorie counting, and macros is the same thing. Whether you're counting calories or counting macros, it makes no difference. You're just using a different metric to track the same exact thing. What you'll see people do this thing where they're let's just say your target was 200 grams of carbs, and they accidentally eat 210 grams of carbs. Now that extra 10 grams of carbs does not matter. It really doesn't. One, these things are not so precise in the first place. You're probably getting 10 grams plus or minus just due to the fact that food labels are not accurate. Okay, maybe a separate video should be dedicated to this, but I know someone who used to weigh their rice cakes because they found out that, oh my god, rice cakes, Sometimes one of them is like a gram or two heavier than another one. And they were totally freaked out by this. So in their package of rice cakes, they would weigh and measure each rice cake, because sometimes one rice cake weighed slightly more than another one. Dude, relax. Like, this is one of those things where, like, it's close enough. Yeah, that's why I make fun of calorie counting at times, because it's kind of like, do you really think every single chicken breast has the exact same number of grams of protein and fat in it? Like, every 4-ounce chicken breast has exactly 1.5 grams of fat. Really? How do you know? Some people are fatter than other people. Some chickens are fatter than other chickens. What's to say that this 4-ounce chicken breast doesn't have 1 gram of fat and another 4-ounce chicken breast has 3 grams of fat? Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Same thing for ground beef. Like, you look at ground beef, this is not like a homogeneous thing. Yeah, it's ground up, but like, if you were to super accurately take your pound of ground beef and break it into, 4 servings of 4 ounces, you might have one that has, 2 grams of fat higher than another one. This is not a perfect science. So, when you accidentally eat 10 grams over, my target was 200 and I ate 210. This is not a big deal. But it is. Because what happens is people go, oh, I'm off my diet. I screwed up. I ate 210 instead of 200. Fuck it. My diet's ruined for the day. I might as well eat anything I want from this point on. And so for the rest of that day, they just have a binge. It's that barrier boundary thing. Okay? People have described this with, like, Weight Watchers. Women are told, oh, you get X number of points per day, and they will overeat by 2 points. And so because they overate by 2 points, they're like, oh, my diet's ruined for the day. I might as well just eat another 20 points. And that's exactly the problem. Now, I'm not telling you that this is logical. It's not logical. And you're not logical. I'm not logical. We're all emotional beings. We are emotional organisms. Like, that's how we function. In fact, actually, if you didn't have the emotional part of your brain, you would be incapable of making any decisions whatsoever. Whenever people have brain damage to parts of their brain that regulate emotion, they no longer have the ability to make a decision at all. They're just like frozen. So you actually need to have that part of you. It's very important. Like, you actually need to be somewhat emotional. Your emotions do dictate things. And so what I'm trying to share here is that there's a part of your brain in this limbic area, right, that gives you these urges to eat food, right? Because we're wired to go eat things because famine was the normal state of human beings for a long time. And so your body actually wants you to eat a whole lot, get fat, put on reserves in case there's a famine. We have a drive. It's okay. Just understand that it's there. But then we put rules in place, and we say, I'm not having another drink of alcohol no matter what. And then when you break that rule, now you've screwed up, and so you feel like a failure, and you feel guilt, and you feel shame. And so it's almost like you're punishing yourself at that point, because now you're going to go and drink 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 drinks. You're just going to go off the rails completely, because it's like, well, I already screwed up once, so I might as well just keep it going. And like I said, people do this with the whole shopping compulsion thing. They spend too much money, and they feel bad about it, so then they go and spend even more money. Like, this is well documented. Like, when they ask people, why did you do that? People are like, well, I bought more because I felt bad about it. And that doesn't make sense. And that's okay, because it's not supposed to make sense. You're emotional. Emotions don't always make sense. Like, it's just the way we are. Like, emotions are not rational. By definition. If it's emotional, it's not rational. So, you overspent. And in this case, we're talking about overspending on your macros or overspending on your calories. And so then you feel like a failure. I'm off my diet. I screwed up. And you feel guilt, and you feel shame, and you feel like you broke the rule. So then you're like, fuck it. I'm going to eat a whole half-gallon of ice cream. I had one chocolate chip cookie. The temptation was just too great. I gave in and I had one. I'm going to eat a dozen now. And that's what happens. And so here's a weird thing about that, though. What if you weren't tracking your macros? What if you weren't tracking calories? You wouldn't even know that you overate by 10. Like, you wouldn't know that you overate by 10 grams. Or you wouldn't know that you overate by 100 calories. You wouldn't even know. the paradox of this situation is that by bringing your attention to it, suddenly now you're aware of it, and so now you're also aware of it whenever you screw up. Not that 100 calories or even, 10 grams of carbs or anything like that is a big deal, because it isn't. Across the course of the week, across the course of the month, who cares? Imagine yourself, trying to stick to a 2,200 calorie intake, and you hit it 29 out of 30 days. But one of those days you accidentally ate 2,500. Is that really going to make a difference across the whole month? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It doesn't make a difference across the whole month. That extra intake, now spread it across the other 29 days, and it's so minimal that you're still going to make progress in your weight loss goal. But what happens is on that day where you accidentally overate, you broke that rule, you broke that barrier, and so then you're like, oh, this is terrible, I'm off my diet, I already ate too much, I overate, so for the rest of the day I'm just going to eat whatever I want, because you're now, quote, off your diet. And it's that binary thinking that gets us into trouble. It's emotional, it's not rational. And so it's kind of like, I'll throw this in as another example. It's like those sleep trackers. There's actually research showing this. You could have had a really good night of sleep, and if your sleep tracker tells you that you didn't sleep well, people are like, oh yeah, I do feel awful. Now, we actually lied to you in the study. We know from our sleep tracker that you actually did sleep well, but we told you that you didn't sleep well. And just like that, people are instantly like, yeah, I feel terrible. Meanwhile, someone had a bad night of sleep and we tell them, you slept great. And they're like, I did? Yeah, I guess I did. I feel pretty good. This is true even in athletes. If you guys aren't familiar with things like Omega Wave, on game day, if an athlete comes in and their numbers look like shit, you just tell them, hey man, you're going to have a great game today. You're fully recovered. Power of suggestion. But if you came in on game day and I told you, oh dude, you are fried, there's no way you're going to play well tonight. No matter how they felt before I made that statement, now they're going to be like, oh, yeah, maybe I do feel a little. It's kind of like that weird thing where, like, if you can mess with people, and you can be like, oh man, my throat's really sore. Do you have a sore throat too? And suddenly people will be like, yeah, I do actually. By bringing people's attention to it, they will perceive something that they were unaware of before. And it will influence them, just like telling people, oh, yeah, you had a really bad night of sleep according to this data, even though you know they had a good night of sleep. And they're like, yeah, I did have a bad night of sleep. That's the downside to tracking these things. And I'm not telling you don't track. But I am telling you a warning here to be mindful of this, okay? And so I do not do nutrition. I don't coach people on nutrition. I don't tell people how many macros to eat. I don't tell people what to eat. Nothing. I don't do that. I am more than happy to talk about the science of nutrition, but you have to make decisions for yourself. What I do encourage people to do, though, is to set ranges. And the ranges are always soft. Okay? So let's say you choose, I'm going to eat a gram of protein per pound of body weight, and you weigh 150 pounds. Then you set your range somewhere between 140 and 160. And this is not going to hurt you. If one day you have 140 and another day you have 158, it's not a big deal. You're still close enough to that 150 range. And I tell people all the time, you should have soft targets, soft goals, right? The goal isn't to be perfect. If you land on 200 every single time and your goal was to have 200 grams of carbs, okay, if you land on 200 every single time, in reality you're not, because we know that food labels are off by as much as 20%. But in addition to that, you're almost causing yourself excessive stress to focus on a number that much. Does it really matter if you ate 195 or 205? Nope. It won't even matter if you ate 190 or 210. As long as you're just roughly around that range, it's close enough. And you're going to have variance from one day to the next. So across 30 days, it'll balance out. Now, imagine across 390, 300, 400, 500, 600. days. Like, you just start taking it out further and further and further. You do that for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Like, it's all going to just kind of average out in the end. Like, this is not something that where you should just be focusing on a 1 day goal. Like, it really doesn't matter what you eat today. Like, oh, I ate exactly 2,200 calories, not one over, not one under. Cool. Are you really going to do that every single day for the rest of your life? Do you want to? In reality, if you just kind of ballpark and say, I'm going to shoot for 2,000 calories plus or minus 200, and that's a big one. I'm giving you anything between 1,800 and 2,200. If you just stick around that, but you do it consistently for 5 years, like, it's all going to average out. You'll have some days where you eat a little more. You'll have some days where you eat a little less. You'll have some days where you're a little more active. You'll have some days where you're a little less active. It's the long term that matters. But you see, what happens is people get wrapped up on this number, and then, of course, they're perfectionist. When they break that barrier, when they break that boundary, they're like, oh my God, I screwed up. I'm a failure. And they feel guilt, and they feel like they're off their diet. And so if you're off your diet, right, it's a switch. You're either on or you're off. So when I'm off, it's like, well, fuck it, I'm not tracking anything else for the rest of the day, but I am going to eat anything I want for the rest of the day. And that's where people get themselves into problems. And I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that food is the same as necessarily alcohol or something like that, but it is a similar psychology behind these things. People are on or off. So I abstain from alcohol entirely, or I have one drink, which leads to 10. Because it broke that rule. So once you break that rule, you broke that barrier, now you're off the wagon, or whatever you want to call it. You're off your diet, and so then you just go all out and destroy things. It's like dropping your iPhone and then stomping on it. I mean, that's the closest thing I can think of. Like, I dropped my iPhone, it didn't break, because you had one Oreo. That's not a big deal. But then you stomp on your iPhone and eat the whole box of Oreos. You could make it like a thing about shooting at a target even. You take one shot and it didn't hit the bullseye exactly. You hit like a 9 instead of a 10. Oh, well, I might as well just empty the entire magazine into the wall. And it's like, huh? But you were so close. Close is good. If your goal is to hit 100 and you hit 90 consistently, that's way better than you hitting 100 once and then on another day you just go to 0. I'd rather hit 90 7 days a week than to hit 100 2 days a week, or even 5 days a week, and then have zeros on Saturday and Sunday. You know what I'm saying here? Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I really am trying to make this video helpful instead of critical. So what I'm trying to give people as a usable, actionable piece of advice here is it's not just like loosen up. It's more than that. It's like learning to have some flexibility and step away from the perfectionist all-in mindset, the on-off switch, and instead think of things more like a dimmer. 90% is good. 80% is good. Like, you're still making progress. Don't have days where you get zeros. That's about it. You don't have to have hundreds every day. You don't have to be 100% on every day. Just aim for 100%. Be happy if you hit 70%. And don't have days where you go, oh, I'm off. It's 99, so I might as well just turn today into a 0. Because you can turn a 99% into a 0. You can turn a 95% into a 0. Because you could just go off the rails and, you run out to Walmart and buy all the ice cream and eat all of it. You could do that. And it will wreck the whole day. And that will have a lot more impact on you across the week, the month, the year, than, that little tiny bit that you accidentally overate. That little tiny bit that you were off, that's not going to matter across the year. But if you have enough of those where they turn into binges, then yes. And at some point you may cause yourself to develop something like binge eating disorder. And so that's what I'm trying to raise awareness to here, is just the fact that, by being overly aware of these things, you have to be cautious to not fall into a trap where you develop a perfectionist all-in, all-out, on-off mentality. So, if you guys like the video, like the video. If this was helpful to you, like the video. If you guys have comments, opinions, experiences, comment below. Not just for my sake. I mean, if you have questions, comment, and I'll try to answer your questions as best as I can. But if you have an experience to share, share it, because other people will read it and they'll benefit from it. And if you guys find this kind of stuff useful, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm really big on this kind of stuff, actually. I like to talk a lot about behavior and psychology. In fact, actually, that's what my wife does, is behavior analysis, which really deserves to be its own field. It shouldn't be considered part of psychology. It's far too empirical to fall under psychology. But that's a different topic for a different time. Neuroscience and behavior analysis should be an entirely separate category of research instead of getting lumped in with things like psychology. Neuroscience has made progress. Cognitive sciences still sometimes get lumped under psychology at different universities. I think that's weird, but I guess it has to do with the departments or something. Anyways, thank you all so much for your time, and like as I always say, I hope this helps even just one person.